series. In our last episode, we got started with building our auth provider, which we created the auth manager class to conform with. We have successfully created our first account, which is good. So continuing with that, we need to handle a couple of things. I would say, first and foremost, we need to do some error management, authentication related error management. Right now, as you can see, we are creating a user and we're saving that user information to the database. But there's a couple of things that I would like for us to quickly address, and that is mostly related to authentication error. And so the first things first is, instead of our create account method, I think it's best if we wrap it inside of a do try block. And here's what I mean by that. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to say a do right there, and I'm going to do a catch. And now I am going to add a print statement. And so generally speaking, when I'm doing printing, I like to use a little bit of emojis. So I'm going to do lock emoji, and I'm going to say failed to create an account, and we're going to have error.localize description. All right, but I would also like to personally just throw custom errors because it just feels more cleaner. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to create a new enum for our error, and I'm going to call it AuthError, and it's going to be of type error. It's going to confront error. And the first case that I want is just, I'm going to say account creation failed. And then maybe we should also create an error case for when we fail to save user information. So I'm going to say failed to save user info. Okay. And then I'm going to come down here. Let's just create an extension on our authentication error and let it be of type localized error. However, I would like for us to pass in a description to these error cases. So I'm going to create a description. Nope, actually not let. Description is just of type string. I want to pass in an associated value into this error cases. Okay, so now I want to have the error description, and I'm just going to switch on self. And for description, I'm just going to return the description on this. Return description. And actually, fail to save user info to database. Sure, and I'm just going to return description here as well. Description is description. Okay, so let's go through this error. So if we fail to create a new user account, we're just going to throw this. We're going to say throw AuthError dot account creation failed, and the error description is just going to be error localized description. Okay. Now let's go down to our save user info to database. I would like for us to wrap this inside of a do try block as well. Okay. And here, let's just print sort of like the above. I'm going to copy this print statement, and I'm going to say failed to save created user info to database. Okay. And I'm going to throw AuthError dot fail to save user info, and it's just going to be error the localized description. Okay. That feels like a good handle. That feels like better error management. The next thing I would like for us to do is to actually show this error to our users. So like, for example, if we're going to the sign up screen, nothing actually happens if there's an actual error. And the way I'm going to handle that is I'm going to attach an alert field to our login screen. And it's going to be pretty simple. We already sort of have the necessary mechanisms that we need. And so I'm going to say alert, and it's presented is going to be, oh no, I just hate this. It's presented. Is presented. Screw it, I'm just going to do that. I don't want the content. I just want that. Sorry about that. I'm struggling today. And what do I want here? Well, I want the auth screen model, and I want the error state, and that's going to determine if I'm going to show the error or not. So I'm going to say show error. Why is that not showing? Yeah, error state dot show error. Because if I jump into auth screen model, I'm pretty sure our auth screen model has an error state right here. Yep. And we have a show error property inside of that tuple. So let me make sure I am referencing the right thing. We have an error state, and then we have show error. So, okay, it's presented, show error. Why is it yelling? Well, first things first, I'm going to present an alert, and the alert is going to have a title and a dismiss button. So I'm going to say title, and the title is just going to be of type text. And that's just going to be the auth screen model. Okay, what do we need? Error state, error message. That feels right. And then the dismiss button is just going to be default. And I'm just going to put text that says OK. Okay, let's clean up some of this. Make sure everything is working. Why is this? Why do we? Oh yeah, we need a comma here. Okay, let's clean up that. Make sure everything is working, and let's wait for our SwiftUI preview to boot up. Okay, so let's go into our authentication screen and let's just enter just invalid credentials. Create an account, and look at that, failed to create an account. The email is badly formatted. That is awesome. So we're properly handling our error right now, and I think that's good news overall. So let's jump back to our auth provider. Actually, let's jump into our auth screen model and let us mark this as a main actor, because right now this is going to yell at us. Is loading is going to yell at us eventually because this is not a main actor and it's not occurring on the main thread, and we're doing a bunch of activities. For example, the create account functionality is on the background thread, so we want to make sure we jump onto the main thread with the main actor annotation. All right, what else do we have on our agenda? I would say up on the list is we need to handle AutoLogin, and the way we're going to do that is we're going to go into our auth provider, and we are going to first and foremost attach a associated value to our authentication state. So our authentication state, we have pending, logged in, and logged out. Well, when a user is logged in, we would like to know who that user is, that user information. So we're going to pass in a user item into our logged in state. And then when we create, so inside of our create account, we're going to say self.authState, right, .send, and it's going to be logged in. It's going to be new user. And so just with this one line of code, we are going to publish a notification to anybody that is listening. And eventually you'll see how we handle that. Anyone that's subscribed to this auth state publisher would get this new value, would get this new currently logged in user information. And so let's run our app, make sure everything is working, make sure everything is synced up, and then let's think of what we need to do next. Okay, so let's say, awesome, that's exactly what we want. All right, so let's go back to the application. The next line of action, like we said, is AutoLogin. And in order for us to handle AutoLogin, we need to go back to our auth manager and create the logic that can allow us to do that. And so inside of our auth provider or our auth manager, in our AutoLogin, if you really think about it, Firebase gives us a way to be able to do this. And the syntax for it is as follows. So we're saying if the current user is, is nil, we're going to say auth state send .logged out. Else, we're going to, let's see, we're going to fetch current user, and we're going to create a new function for that. But for now, let's just create this. We're going to say fetch current user info. And I'm going to copy this method, go into our extensions down here, and create another private method that's going to be responsible for fetching current user info. Okay, so it's going to be an asynchronous method, of course. And what we really want the fetch current user info to do for us is we want it to go to this database reference. So I'm going to copy this. And I'm going to get the current UID, which is pretty easy to do. We say God-led current UID is equals to auth.auth, the current user, the UID. Okay, and I'm going to say current UID, go to the current UID path. And what do I want to do? Well, I want to observe the changes in value. Snapshot. Okay, what else? So I want the snapshot. I want the error, I suppose. And I'm just going to print failed to get current user info. Okay. And now that I have the current user info, I need to decode it. And the way I'm going to decode that is by extending the user item to have specific dictionary key value pairs. And so I'm going to come down here and I'm going to create an extension on our user item. And I'm going to create an initializer that takes in a dictionary. That's all it does. And the dictionary is going to be a string, a key value pair of string and of type any. And then I'm going to start, mapping the keys to the value. But before I do that, another habit that I like to do, honestly, is to sort of create an extension for my database keys. So I'm going to extend string. I'm going to create some static property. This will make sense in a second. Okay, and the reason I'm doing this is that way we can have a static property and we don't have to pass in the wrong keys. This really comes in handy for situations like this, because then I can say dictionary UID is of type string, else return empty string. And I'm going to say the same thing for username. In the dictionary, the key is of type is called username. Okay, and it's also of type string. And we have an email. The key is also email. It's also of type string. And we have a bio. It's an optional string. And so we're going to return nil. And we have, what's the last one? Profile image URL. And it's of type optional string. And if it's not available in the dictionary, we're going to return nil for that as well. And now we have a cleaner setup. So we have our keys, we have our dictionary mappings. So we're going to go back inside of our, let me think for a second here, guys. So we need to go back and decode those values. And the way in which we're going to do that is by saying, okay, so we're observing a single event. We're going to say godlet user dictionary is equals to snapshot.value, and I know it's of type string to any, else we're going to return. Okay, so I have the dictionary, so I'm going to say the user is equals to user item, takes in a dictionary, so I'm just going to say user dictionary, and I'm going to say self.authentication state.send.logged-in is the user. So this is the logged in user. Logged in user. So we're going to take logged in user, we're going to propagate that down. And because we're good developers, we're going to make sure we create a weak reference here. So we'll say weak self. There we go. Okay, so now, yep, I'm going to remove this. This is actually not an asynchronous function, actually, now that I think about it. So there's really no reason for me to mark that as a sync. So I'm going to remove the await. And I'm actually going to remove the task as well, because I don't need the task. So the auto login logic goes like this. If the current user is nil, right, we'd say it's going to be logged out. We say the auth state is logged out. If it's not nil, we're going to go fetch the currently logged in user. And the reason this is important is because we're going to be using this logic to drive the login presentation views to determine which specific states to show. But anyways, we're going to create a task inside of our private initializer, and we're going to call AutoLogin. Is that what it's called? Or it's just AutoLogin. Okay. Now, I'm going to print a statement here. I'm going to put a print statement here just so I can know which user is currently logged in. So I'm going to say logged in user dot username is logged in. So now let's run our application. Remember, we created a new user in the previous episode. So now with this current logic, we should be able to see that user's username. And why is that not coming up? So when we take a look at the console, we take a look at the print statements, we have a login screen. Authentication logic is pretty solid. Okay, so before we do anything else, right now the main tab view, if we go into our WhatsApp clone, it's just showing the login screen. So we need to change that. We need to create some sort of a root view that's going to be responsible for handling our presentation logic. And the way I'm going to sort of accomplish that, it's pretty simple. And here's what we're going to do. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new folder. So exit out of the auth folder. We're going to create a new folder. We're just going to call it roots. And we're going to create a new group. We're going to call it views. We're going to create a new file, SwiftUI file, and let's call it root screen. You see what we're trying to go for here in just a second. So what is the root screen? Well, before we answer that question, let's create another new folder inside of the roots. Let's create a view model folder, and let's create a view model for our root screen. So we're going to create a new file again, SwiftUI file. We're going to call it root screen model. And this is going to be an observable model. So let's just flow through that really quickly. Final class, because we want it to be static, observable object. And what is the root screen model going to be responsible for? So it's pretty much going to be responsible for handling our authentication state logic. And the way we're going to do that is by creating a published variable here. We're going to call it privately set. And, oh yeah, that's a syntax error. Sorry about that. And we're going to call it auth state, which is the auth state that we have in the auth manager, right? So auth state is pending, right? And then upon initialization, what we're going to do is we're going to listen. So we're going to say auth manager .shared .auth state, right? And let's receive it on the main thread. So receive on and then we're going to listen for changes in the authentication states. So we're going to say auth states Let's make sure we mark it as weak self. And what are we trying to do here? Well, we're trying to say the auth state is equals to, I'm going to change this to latest auth state. Latest auth state is equals to latest auth state. And we need to store this in some sort of a cancelable. So if you're familiar with combine, this is pretty common syntax. I'm just going to call it cancelable. So type any cancelable. I need to import combine. So let's go up here and import combine. Any cancelable, it's optional. And I'm just going to say cancelable is equals to that. Okay, so what's going on here? Well, all we're just doing here is we're just listening for the authentication state in the root screen model. Now let's go back to our root screen and declare a state object up here. So we're going to say state object private view model is going to be our auth screen model, right? And what this root screen is really going to do is just going to toggle between our authentication states. So we're going to say switch view model dot auth state. Okay, and we're going to wait for Xcode to do some auto completion for us. Oh, come on, Xcode. Well, let's just do it ourselves. Pending. So if it's pending, we're going to show a progress view. Okay, and we want the control size to be large. So control size large, and if it's logged in, okay, remember the logged in is going to have the currently logged in user. If it's logged in, we're going to have a main tab view. Okay, and if it's logged out, we're going to have our, you can guess it, login screen. Okay, now let's see what's going on here. View model, that's authentication state. Yeah, if I jump into my auth screen model, nope. Oh, wait a minute, I call auth screen instead of root screen. Sorry about that, guys. That should be root screen model, not auth screen model. All right, so now we're going to take our root screen. We're going to go back to our WhatsApp clone app. We're going to replace the login screen with our root screen. So now let's run our app on the simulator. Let's make sure everything is compiling. And let's jump. And now it should show a logged in screen. You see that? Boom. And look at our print statement that we did earlier. Let me bump this up a little bit. It says QA user is logged in. Why is that? Because if you go inside of our authentication provider, right in here in this auto login functionality, if I can see it, let me bump this back out a little bit. Let me expand this all the way. Inside of our auto login, so when our authentication manager is initialized, it fires this auto login function. And all that this auto login function is trying to do is it's trying to determine, is there a current user, which is a Firebase method, a Firebase authentication method. If there's no current user, then we send the combine publisher. We say, hey, there's no currently logged in user. That means we're currently logged out. So what that means is inside of our root screen, we're going to have the login screen case triggered. Meanwhile, if there's a currently logged in user, right, we go and fetch that current user's information, and we're doing that right here. And so if we jump in here, we grab that current user information, and when we're done grabbing that user information, we send out that combined publication, and we say, hey, root screen, there's a currently logged in user. And so the root screen says, bet, say no more, and presents the main tab view. And so just like that, we have our auto login functionality up and running. And that about does it for this episode. I know we handled a lot. We did some error management. We did some refactoring. But overall, our project is starting to come together because now we have created an account, auto login our user. In our next episode, we're going to sign out of the accounts and sign in with email and password. So that's going to be a lot of fun. If you really enjoyed this episode, please leave a like and subscribe. It means a lot to me. See you guys in the next one.